I knew exactly what they thought of me the moment I sat down at that table, not because anyone said it outright. Not yet. But because of the pauses, the polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the way his mother asked me where I was from, then nodded slowly, like she had just confirmed something disappointing. My name is Evelyn. I'm 29 years old. And that night was my first official dinner with my fiancé's family. They lived in a house that was too large for the number of people in it, the kind of place where every piece of furniture was meant to signal status. His parents sat at the head of the table like they owned not just the home, but everyone in it. His older brother leaned back in his chair, already half smiling, like he was waiting for entertainment. I was the entertainment. So, Evelyn, his mother began, cutting into her food with slow precision. Your parents, what do they do? There it was. I answered calmly, truthfully. I didn't dress it up. My mother was a school clerk. My father passed away when I was young. A brief silence followed. His brother let out a soft laugh. Must have been challenging. It wasn't sympathy. It was a verdict. I smiled politely. It taught me independence. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table. I noticed he didn't say anything. The comments came gradually after that. Carefully worded, wrapped in humor. His aunt joked that marrying into this family must feel like winning the lottery. His father commented on how simple my upbringing must have been compared to theirs. Someone asked if I'd ever traveled internationally before meeting their son. I answered every question gently. I kept my voice soft. I nodded when they spoke. I laughed when they laughed. I let them believe I was exactly who they wanted me to be. Naive, grateful, easily impressed. What they didn't realize was that I was listening to everything. They talked openly about the properties, the company, the renovations they were planning, the loans they were sure would work out because, as his mother said confidently, everything is solidly in the family. That phrase came up more than once. In the family. His father leaned back, lifting his glass. We've built something stable here, something that will last generations, his brother added. And soon, it'll all be protected once the wedding happens. I noticed the assumption, the expectation, that I would marry in, blend in, and never ask questions. I looked down at my plate, played with my food. Let my silence be mistaken for ignorance. At one point, his mother smiled at me and said, You're very quiet. Evelyn, that's good. It means you know your place. The table chuckled softly. I smiled back, because she was right about one thing. I did know my place. Just not in the way she thought. What none of them knew, what they never bothered to ask, was what I did for a living. Or why their family lawyer always responded to my emails first, or why certain documents had been updated months before that dinner ever took place. They didn't notice the slim folder tucked inside my bag by the door. They didn't notice because people who think they own everything rarely check the paperwork. They assume it will always work in their favor. I finished my meal quietly and waited. I didn't go to that dinner unprepared. I went knowing exactly what role they expected me to play, and choosing to play it better than they ever could have imagined. People assume silence means weakness. They assume calm means confusion. They assume that if you don't interrupt, don't argue, don't correct them, then you must not understand what's happening. That assumption has always worked in my favor. What my fiancé's family never asked was why I stayed so quiet. Why I never flinched when they talked down to me. Why I didn't defend myself when his mother implied I should be grateful just to sit at their table. The truth was simple. I had learned long ago that power reveals itself when it feels safe. And that night, they felt very safe. They talked freely because they thought I couldn't follow. They joked because they believed I had nothing to compare it to. They explained their family success slowly, like they were teaching a child, never once considering that I already knew more about their situation than they did. I let his father explain how the company had been passed down cleanly. I let his brother brag about how the house was fully secured. I let his mother talk about marriage as if it were a formality that would fold me neatly into their system. All while I nodded, all while I listened. What they didn't know was that my job, my actual work, was built on listening to people who talked too much. I worked with contracts, ownership transfers, liability structures. I read what others signed without reading. I noticed what people assumed didn't matter. And months before that dinner, something had mattered. When my fiancé proposed, his parents insisted on updating some paperwork. They framed it as efficiency, legacy planning, protection for the future. They asked if I could help review things quickly, since I was good with details. That was the moment I started paying attention. At first glance, everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. But details don't lie, they hide. The ownership structures were layered. The signatures were rushed. Certain assets had been shifted under temporary arrangements. Others were listed under holding entities that didn't align with the way they spoke about them. They talked like owners. The documents told a different story. I asked questions gently, casually. I didn't accuse. I didn't challenge. I framed everything as concern, just to be safe, just for clarity, just in case something ever happened. They waved me through. They trusted me because they didn't think I mattered. Over the next few weeks, I verified everything, cross-checked filings, requested confirmations, made sure every step was legal, clean, and irreversible. And I never told them what I was doing. So when his mother joked at dinner that I must not be used to this kind of lifestyle, I smiled because she had no idea how familiar I was with the numbers behind it. When his brother laughed about how outsiders never understand how real wealth works, I looked down at my plate and let him believe that. When my fiancé squeezed my hand again, harder this time, sensing the tension, I realized something important. He knew how his family treated me, and he was letting it happen. That was when my patience shifted from strategy to certainty. I wasn't quiet because I was afraid of them. I was quiet because I was deciding whether he deserved to know what I knew. By the time dessert was served, his father raised his glass again and made a toast about trust and family unity. He spoke about how everything they had was secure, protected, untouchable. Everyone smiled, everyone relaxed, and I finally understood why this moment had to happen exactly this way. They needed to believe the story they were telling, because the truth only lands when no one is bracing for it. I excused myself politely near the end of the evening, saying I had a headache. His mother nodded approvingly, as if my fragility confirmed every assumption she'd made about me. I picked up my bag. The folder inside felt heavier than paper should, not because of its weight, but because of what it was about to take away from them. There's a difference between owning something and believing you own it. My fiancé's family had spent years living inside that belief. They spoke with confidence, moved with entitlement, and made plans based on assets they assumed were permanent. The house, the company, the accounts that quietly paid for their comfort. But paperwork doesn't care about assumptions, and neither does the law. I didn't confront them right away. That would have been too easy, and too kind. Instead, I let the pattern continue. I attended another gathering, then another. Each time, they spoke a little more openly, a little more carelessly. They trusted me more the quieter I became. His father loved explaining the family business to me, even though I never asked. He talked about how the company had survived downturns, how they'd taken smart loans, how the properties were collateral but nothing to worry about. The banks trust us, he said once, with a confident smile. Everything's under control. What he didn't realize was that the banks trusted the names on the documents, and his wasn't one of them. The house they lived in, the one his mother treated like a symbol of her status, was technically owned by a holding structure created years ago to manage risk. That structure had been amended, quietly, legally, signed during a period when they were distracted by other concerns. The company followed the same pattern. Shares had been redistributed under the justification of temporary protection, emergency measures. They called them measures that were never reversed. They thought time alone would reset everything. It doesn't. Time only locks things in. The most fragile part of their entire setup, though, was the debt. They talked about it like it was harmless, like it belonged to the company, not them, like someone else would always handle it. But debt doesn't float in the air. It attaches itself to whoever is legally responsible, and that responsibility had shifted. I discovered that several guarantees, personal ones, had been removed from their names during restructuring, replaced with a single entity they trusted because it felt abstract. An entity they assumed was still in the family. It was just not in the way they thought. What made it worse was how casually they treated it. His brother once joked that if anything ever went wrong, they'd sort it out as a family. That phrase again, as if family status overrides legal reality, as if blood rewrites contracts. I kept my expression neutral. I asked harmless questions. I let them keep talking. And slowly, the picture became complete. They weren't wealthy in the way they believed. They were leveraged. Comfortable only as long as no one looked too closely. And the only person who had been looking closely was me. The night I finally decided it was time, we were invited to another family dinner, a celebration. They said, no reason, just togetherness. I knew what that meant. They were relaxed, confident, certain nothing could disrupt their position. I brought the folder with me again. This time, I didn't leave it by the door. Halfway through the meal, his father started talking about renovations, about expanding, about how ownership makes things easier. I set my fork down gently, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. I have a question, I said softly. The table went quiet, not tense, just mildly surprised. They weren't used to me interrupting. Yes, his mother said, smiling, as if indulging a child. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the table. It made a dull sound when it touched the wood. I just want to make sure I understand something, I continued, because you've mentioned these assets several times. His brother leaned forward, amused. You don't need to worry about that stuff. I know, I replied. That's why I already checked. The smile on his mother's face froze. I opened the folder, not all the way, just enough for the top page to be visible. Names, dates, official stamps. I want to know, I said calmly, who here believes they legally own what they're talking about? Silence settled over the table. Not confusion. Not yet. Just the first crack in certainty. No one reached for the folder. That was the first thing I noticed. They stared at it the way people stare at something dangerous, like touching it might make the problem real. His father's confident posture stiffened. His mother's smile thinned, her fingers tightening slightly around her glass. What is this? She asked. Still calm? Still polite? I didn't answer right away. I slid the folder a few inches closer to the center of the table, where everyone could see it without feeling invited to touch it. Just paperwork, I said. The kind that decides things. His brother laughed, a short, dismissive sound. You brought documents to dinner? I brought clarity, I replied. That wiped the amusement from his face. I opened the folder fully this time. I didn't rush. I didn't explain everything at once. I let them see the formatting first. The headers. The seals. The layout that instantly separates real documents from meaningless ones. These are the latest filings, I continued. Property ownership, corporate structure, and liability assignments. All finalized. His father leaned forward now. He didn't ask permission. He simply pulled the folder closer to himself. As he scanned the first page, I watched his expression change. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a subtle narrowing of the eyes, a pause where there shouldn't have been one. "This doesn't look right," he said. "It is," I answered. "It's just not familiar." His mother leaned over his shoulder. I saw the moment her breathing changed. She read the same lines twice. The house, the one she hosted every holiday in, was listed under a holding entity. An entity whose controlling interest had been reassigned. The company, their pride, showed a similar pattern. "What is this?" she demanded, louder now. "Why are these names here?" "Because that's where ownership sits," I said evenly. His brother pushed his chair back slightly. "You're saying we don't own our own house?" "I'm saying," I corrected, "that you live in it." My fiancé finally spoke. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" I turned to him. "I'm answering the questions your family keeps asking without realizing it." His father flipped through the pages faster now, his confidence cracking with each turn. "This must be temporary. These were precautionary filings." "They were," I agreed. "And then they became permanent." His mother looked up at me sharply. "How do you even have these?" "Because I was asked to review them," I replied. "And because no one ever revoked my access." The silence that followed was heavy. Not shock, yet. This was recognition. They were starting to understand that something had moved without their permission. His brother slammed his hand lightly against the table. "You had no right to interfere." "I didn't interfere," I said. "I finalized what you signed." That's when panic crept in. Not screaming panic, not chaos. The kind that shows up as denial. His mother straightened her posture, regaining her tone. "This is some kind of misunderstanding. These things can be reversed." "Some can," I said. "These can't." I turned one page and tapped a single line with my finger. "That clause locks the structure. It exists to prevent impulsive reversals." His father stared at it. "I suggested it," I added quietly. "You approved it." His brother's face flushed. "So what? You planned this? You waited until you were engaged?" I met his gaze. "I planned to protect myself." My fiancé stood up abruptly. "You should have told me." I looked at him carefully before answering. "You never asked." That landed harder than anything else. His mother exhaled sharply. "You're embarrassing us." "I'm informing you," I said. "There's a difference." She pointed at the folder. "What do you want?" The question hung in the air. Not "why did you do this?" Not "how do we fix it?" Just, "what do you want?" That was when I knew everything I needed to know. "I don't want anything," I said calmly. "I just needed you to know the truth. Before you said anything else about me." No one spoke. Because now, every comment they had made, every assumption, every insult, had a price attached to it. And they could all see the numbers. The silence didn't last long. It never does when people realize the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. His brother was the first to break. "This is ridiculous," he said sharply, pushing his chair back. "You manipulated us. You waited until we trusted you." I stayed seated, calm, still. "No," I replied. "You trusted yourselves. That only made it worse." His mother stood next, her voice rising just enough to sound authoritative instead of desperate. "You're twisting things. These arrangements were never meant to exclude us." "They don't exclude you," I said. "They define you." His father was quiet, flipping through the documents again. Slower this time. He wasn't arguing. He was calculating. I could see it in his eyes. The mental math. The risk assessment. The realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding. "This puts us in a vulnerable position," he said finally. I nodded. It always did. His mother turned to him sharply. "Why didn't you check this?" "I did," he snapped back. At the time, that phrase carried years of assumptions behind it. Then the focus shifted, inevitably, back to me. "You should have told us what you were doing," his brother said. "I did," I answered. "In writing. You signed." His mother crossed her arms. "You knew what this would look like." "Yes," I said. I also knew how it would feel to be spoken about the way you spoke about me. That landed, not as guilt, as offense. She looked at me like I'd crossed a line that existed only for people like her. This is family business. You don't expose family like this. I tilted my head slightly. You didn't seem worried about family when you were mocking mine. Her mouth opened, then closed. My fiancé finally spoke again, his voice tight. Can't we talk about this later? Privately? That word, privately, rang hollow. You mean without witnesses? I asked. He flinched. His mother stepped closer to me now, lowering her voice as if proximity would reestablish control. Let's be clear. You are marrying into this family. That means certain responsibilities. I looked up at her. Respect is one of them. She ignored that. You don't get to walk in and rearrange everything. I didn't rearrange, I said. I documented what already existed. His brother scoffed. You're enjoying this. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. I'm finished with it, I said instead. That's when the blame fully settled on me. Suddenly, I was ambitious, calculating, cold. They questioned my motives, my character, my intentions from the very beginning. Not once did anyone ask why they had been so careless. Not once did anyone apologize. His father closed the folder slowly. This has consequences, he said. I know, I replied. For us, he clarified. I met his eyes. For all of us. My fiancé looked trapped between us, his silence louder than any accusation. He didn't defend me. He didn't challenge them. He just watched, and in that moment, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about documents or assets. This was about how easily they turned on me when their comfort was threatened. His mother's voice softened suddenly, shifting strategy. Evelyn, we can fix this. We can renegotiate. You don't need to do this. I smiled faintly. I already did. She stiffened. Then what happens now? I stood for the first time that evening. What happens now? The question everyone asks when control slips. That, I said, gathering my bag. Depends on what you say next. They watched me carefully, afraid, not of what I'd done, but of what I hadn't done yet. I didn't leave right away. That surprised them. They expected a dramatic exit, a slammed door, some kind of victory lap. Instead, I stayed standing by the table, giving them just enough time to sit with what they'd said and what they hadn't. My fiancé finally broke the silence. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I nodded. Now is fine. He glanced at his parents, then back at me. Alone. I looked around the table, at the people who had just accused me of manipulation while refusing to take responsibility for their own decisions. No, I said. This concerns everyone. His mother opened her mouth to object, but I raised a hand. Not sharply, just enough to stop her. I've listened all evening, I said. Now it's my turn to ask one question. They froze. I turned to my fiancé. If your family had never mocked me, I asked. If they had never assumed I was small, irrelevant, or lucky to be here, would you have told them what you knew about these documents? He stared at me, not confused. Cornered. I didn't know everything, he said carefully. I nodded. I know. That wasn't the question. I waited. The silence stretched. His brother shifted uncomfortably. His father looked down at the table. His mother watched my fiancé like the answer might still save something. I would have talked to them, he said finally. Before or after the wedding? I asked. He didn't answer. That was the answer. I took a breath. Second question. His shoulders tightened. When they spoke about my background, I continued. When they laughed. When they told me I should be grateful just to sit here. Why didn't you stop them? He swallowed. I didn't want to make things worse. For who? I asked. He hesitated. For you, he said. I smiled sadly. No. For you. That hurt him more than anger ever could. His mother cut in sharply. This is between you two. It was, I said. Until tonight. I turned back to my fiancé. Last question. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had leaned in. If the roles were reversed, I said slowly, and my family had treated you this way, would you have stayed quiet? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't need words. I thought so, I said. That was it. No shouting, no accusations. Just clarity. I reached for my ring and slid it off my finger. The soft clink as I placed it on the table sounded louder than anything else that night. His mother gasped. Don't be dramatic. I looked at her calmly. I'm being precise. My fiancé stared at the ring like it was something fragile. You're ending this over paperwork? I shook my head. I'm ending this over loyalty. His father exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. You're making a mistake. I met his gaze. I've never made one more carefully. I picked up my bag. No one tried to stop me. Not because they didn't want to, but because they finally understood they no longer had the leverage to do so. At the door, I paused and turned back once. For what it's worth, I said. I never wanted to take anything from you. His mother scoffed. Then why did you? I didn't, I replied. You handed it to me the moment you decided I didn't matter. I left without another word, and behind me, an engagement ended, not with betrayal or rage, but with the quiet certainty that I would never shrink myself to fit inside someone else's comfort again. I didn't feel triumphant when I walked away. That surprised me most. There was no rush of victory, no satisfaction in knowing I'd unsettled their world. What I felt instead was lightness, the kind that comes when you stop carrying something that was never yours to hold. The days after that dinner were quiet, too quiet. No calls from my former fiancé, no messages asking to talk things through. When his mother finally reached out, it wasn't to apologize, it was to negotiate. She framed it as concern. We're worried about how this situation might look, she said. People talk. I almost laughed. People had been talking about me from the moment I sat at their table. I'm not interested in appearances, I replied. I'm interested in closure. She didn't like that word. Neither did her husband, who emailed next. Long paragraphs about misunderstandings, about intentions, about how families sometimes say things they don't mean. I read everything once. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. The legal reality settled in quickly after that. The bank requested updated confirmations. The company's board asked for clarification. Quiet processes, triggered automatically, without drama. Systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. The house didn't go dark overnight. The company didn't collapse. But the illusion of effortless control vanished. Suddenly, approvals took longer. Decisions required signatures that didn't belong to them anymore. For the first time, they had to ask, not me, but the structures they'd ignored. I moved on faster than they expected. I returned the dress, canceled the venue, closed that chapter with the same precision I used in my work. People told me I was strong, resilient. What they didn't see was how calm I felt. There's a strange peace that comes from being underestimated your entire life. Because when you finally stop explaining yourself, you don't owe anyone a performance. A few weeks later, I ran into my former fiancé by chance. He looked tired, smaller, somehow. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he said. I nodded. I know. You didn't have to do it like that. I considered that. There was no way to do it that wouldn't make you uncomfortable. He looked down. I should have stood up for you. Yes, I said. You should have. There was nothing else to add. I didn't take revenge. I took my dignity and walked away. The assets they mocked me around, the ones they spoke of like birthrights, were never my prize. They were just proof. Evidence that silence doesn't mean absence, and calm doesn't mean consent. What I walked away with mattered more: autonomy, clarity, and the certainty that I will never again sit quietly while someone decides my worth for me. They thought I was naive. They thought I was small. They were wrong. And this time, the paperwork agreed with me.